What is going on, people? Welcome to Church Next. This is just a podcast that is about church. It's about leadership. It's about what God's doing. God's doing something new. And some of the language that we use is this idea of a new wineskin. And so we're just super excited to have conversations with people, leaders from all different veins of the church, all different expressions, styles, just to really try to capture what God's saying and doing. No one at all has kind of the mutually exclusive revelation and expression of style of what God's doing. It's just multifaceted to meet and reach a diverse human race, and it's beautiful and it's powerful. And so the goal of these episodes is to just engage in helpful conversations that hopefully help you as a leader, hopefully help you as a follower of Jesus, hopefully help you as someone in church life as you unpack what that means for you as you follow Jesus. And so today we have the insane privilege of chatting with a man by the name of David Storer. He's got an incredible kind of resume of church pioneering, planting. He's gone through a pretty major succession plan of a church of 3,000 people with properties and all that. He's been in campus model ministry, grassroots pioneering church ministry, right through to him now kind of helping on like an executive team of a mega church, I suppose, a really large church out of Australia that's a global church that he leads pastors and staff and all those sorts of things. He's a wonderful man, and this conversation's a really, really insightful one. I wanted to go in about 20 different tangents. So enjoy it. Here's Pastor David Storer. Well, we are here with Pastor David Storer, a pastor, currently from Western Australia in Perth, but as a man that's been around the place. And Pastor David, welcome and thanks for being on today.
Thanks for having me. Always
really wonderful to have you here. Pastor David and his wife, Sally, I actually got to know them when I was in Western Australia, grew up there, still go for the West Coast Eagles, unfortunately, at this moment in time. But Pastor David was a leader in our state at the moment in the movement that we're a part of, the Australian Christian Churches, led a wonderful church over there, and has always been someone that has inspired me on a whole lot of levels. I've rubbed shoulders with your children too, Pastor David, which has been good in different things, Joel on the keys and all those sorts of things. So there's a bit of connection there over the time. And I'm not sure if you remember this, but we kind of came out of a pretty tricky church situation in a season there at one point in time. And Pastor David, it was a real significant moment for me, and I remember it really clearly. We were in some random little coffee shop in South Perth, and you, as the leader of a movement of a state, reached out to me for a coffee, primarily just to check in, I suppose, and that just spoke absolute volumes to me. And I've never really had the opportunity to just thank you for that, but it was a really significant moment for me, just knowing that in the midst of everything that's happening in your world and was happening in mine at the time, there were just people that cared and you could talk to. So thank you. 20 years later. I really do appreciate that. Pastor David, I wanted to, I suppose, just start by just hearing a bit about your journey. I know you weren't always a West Australian from my understanding, and just how you ended up in WA, how the call of God happened, and how you what you were doing prior to that, but then also a brief synopsis of the journey up until now.
Okay, a really quick sweep. I was a bit of a hippie, and I found myself in Cairns, North Queensland, looking up a girl that I went to high school with, who was now, unbeknownst to me, a born-again Christian. She convinced me to come along to this Jesus People coffee shop. They shared Jesus with me. I had a real power encounter. Wasn't churched at all, so that were my early years being discipled by these people. became slowly aware of how God speaks to you by, this thought just kept coming to me of preaching and teaching. And I thought
Mm.
at first it was just my pride, my ego, but eventually I realized, hey, this is how God talks to you.
Mm.
I had a trade, I was an electrician. And so that young lady is now my wife. Uh, and let's see, where did we go from there? We went to Bible college, went to Rhema Bible College in Townsville, David Cartledge.
Yep.
We left there, we went to Billawheeler, which is a mining town in central Queensland. So I am a Queenslander. We assisted there for a while. Then we went and pioneered a church in Charters Towers, which is west of Townsville. And then we left there. We went from there to Cairns, and I was on team at a church there for some time. And then we went to New South Wales, to Newcastle, and pioneered a church at Swansea.
Amazing.
And then from there, we went to Victoria, took over a church in country Victoria, Kyabram,
Okay.
was there for 7 years. And then from there, we came to Perth, where we took
Wow.
over a church that was pioneered by Jim McCourt.
Yep.
It had about 200 people on a good Sunday. And yeah, we've been here ever since.
Amazing.
So yeah, we stopped our moving once we got to Perth.
Well, it's a nice place to stop. I know that
Mm.
firsthand. So good one. That's amazing. Yeah, what an adventure, I suppose is the word. And
Mhm.
just how many places you've been to, so exciting. And the impact there. And now, and we'll obviously talk a little bit about this later if that's okay. But obviously, that church, since you um, kind of have segued out of and transitioned out of that kind of senior pastor, senior leader role into a different role now at a church called Kingdom City. Can you explain us what you're doing in that environment?
Yeah, so I guess we'll talk about how that happened a little bit later, but I'm on the global executive. So my role is to, well, we have a Bible school called Greenhouse. I'm one of the lecturers there. I oversee the missions component, so all of the partners we have missionally. This year, 80 plus different partners.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot happening there. And I guess I pastor the pastors as well of the different campuses.
Yeah, cool.
And
I love that. So you're playing like a kind of more apostolic leadership role of other leaders within the church. And for those of you that don't know of Kingdom City, I mean, look it up, but it's having a massive impact around the world, and God's definitely moving through it. So it's really, really exciting. Pastor David, take me back to those early days when you were, I suppose, from how I know you just explained, you took over a church of maybe 200 people were attending on a Sunday. And from what I knew, when I kind of became aware of what was happening in the church was called Perth Christian Life Centre, um, it was just growing. It was healthy. There was things happening. It was just exciting. What were some of your challenges in that time, or the roadblocks from when you took it on to bringing it into that place of health and vitality and growth?
yeah, well, there was a lot happening. That was the Rodney Howard Brown River sort of days. That was in 1996 when I arrived, and the church was well and truly into that. I was too. It was great, but probably the biggest challenge was realizing the river's meant to go somewhere. You're not
Mm,
just meant to splash around in it.
mm,
If there is a river flowing here, it's actually meant to be taking us somewhere. So
wow.
there was that, I guess, realizing that this is something God's doing, but it's a progressive unfolding towards further things, not to just
Yeah.
stay parked in that place of whatever was happening that moved the spirit.
Mm,
Um, So what other were roadblocks? It was a little bit I inherited that the previous pastor probably needed to tidy up. That was a roadblock. I guess when you take over someone else's church, you've got a board that need to adjust to your style, etc., and so on. There was some of that. Um, so that there was some challenges there
Mm.
for sure, but there was more good things than there was challenges. Probably mm, the breakthrough started to happen mainly with our children's church, actually, surprisingly enough. I think I was
Okay.
one of the first to actually put on a full-time children's pastor.
Wow.
Um, and just recognize that a lot of the people who were coming were really concerned about their children,
Mm.
and they wanted more than just a kids club. They actually wanted their children properly taught, and so we put a lot of things in place. So that was a real key. The youth group was going absolutely ballistic as well. It was a revival. So I
Mm.
think, as well as me acknowledging maybe I did a few things well,
Yeah.
it was also something supernatural happening, I have to acknowledge,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, at the same time. And it was like, riding on the back of a tiger and holding on for dear life and not falling off. I mean,
Yeah.
literally
Yeah.
watching the attendance grow week by week by week. And we
Yeah.
were, to my recollection, we were the first ACC church in the state to break through 1,000 people.
Mm.
And the interesting
Amazing.
thing about that was, it was like, when the tide comes in, all the boats start to rise together. And
Yeah.
it seemed to
Beautiful.
trigger a belief in the state then that if I could do it, so could others. And
Yeah.
yeah, it really was an exciting time.
Oh, I love that. There's so much I want to dive into around just around that. Like even just that last thought around the role of apostolic leader, I think in regions, or we call them states and stuff like that, in Australia, but just how significant that ministry is, and how powerful it is. And I think I had a privilege of kind of than most, or some of our audience wouldn't have had the opportunity that I had to watch that going on, from not being a part of the church there, but looking at it from as a neighbor sort of thing. And even upon reflection, just looking at all the wonderful names right around Australia now that have come out of that season of ministry that
Mm.
happened, all those years ago, is just phenomenal, and is so a part of God's work. What would you say in those growth times? Because you said it's like being on the back of a tiger. Ministry can sometimes go in two extremes, where you're on the back of a tiger and hold on for dear life, and other times it's like, Lord, what am I doing here?
Mm. Mm.
Nothing seems to be happening. But in your case, what were some of those challenges that you faced with the growth? Because I think we all want growth as leaders and pastors and all those sorts of things, but it's another thing um, to, I suppose, be able to just walk that out in a healthy way. Have you got any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
well, that's where I learned there's a difference between principles and preferences.
Mm.
And I had to quickly change my preferences.
Mm.
It's like, you really love this pair of
Love that.
shoes, but you outgrow them. And
Yep.
and if you keep wearing them, you'll actually stunt the growth of your feet. So
Mm.
putting away that method and that preference that I loved very quickly. Sometimes within a couple of months, we were virtually going, okay, we need to restructure again.
Wow.
Um, and I think if I hadn't have been able to accommodate
Mm.
changes,
Mm.
letting go of something that I really loved the way that this worked, to
Mm.
now restructuring, putting different layers of leadership, releasing some of the things that I couldn't hold on to anymore.
Yep.
Um, Yeah, and having to do it very quickly. I remember, I didn't know everyone's names
Mhm.
anymore. I'd drive past the church and the car park would be full, and I didn't know what the heck was going. Just releasing, delegating
Yeah,
stuff. I think we can become the lid sometimes because
interesting.
whether we like it or not, we want to know everything that's going on. We want to control it. And
Mm,
so that was, learning to let go, trust other people
mm,
who are gifted and gifted in areas that are better than me, and not feel intimidated by their gifting, but actually going, you know what, I see the grace of God on your life. This is great. So I had to do that with children's ministry, with youth ministry, with lots of different areas.
yeah,
And so we just
yeah,
kept lifting the lid.
yeah.
Uh,
Oh, it's amazing. I'm
mm,
just in the middle of reading Steve Covey's book, Trust and
okay.
Inspire. And he talks about the difference between command and what does he say? He calls it control and command style of leadership, and trust and inspire. And everything you're saying, I was going to ask you before you mentioned that word, just how hard did you find it, or did you find it difficult? Just to trust and release people into new things that were outside of your kind of paradigm of thinking, in order for the church at that time to move ahead. Was that a challenge for you, or is that something that you find just a part of your personality easy?
Yeah, I remember it was uh, people starting to use the term apostolic to describe me. And I remember the first time I heard somebody do that, I thought, am I really? It's like, yeah, you can't smell your own smell, and I like, oh, okay. Look, while we were in Victoria, I really got kingdom. I understood kingdom. And that became probably the biggest shift in my style and thinking.
Mm,
And it just, part of that understanding is, I had no problem releasing people, because even though I'm releasing them, planting them out, we developed Harvest Net, which is a church planting network.
yep.
No remorse. I celebrated it because I saw it as kingdom growth. It wasn't,
Mm,
all about me. It was, that's where I learned to get my ego out of the way. Because
great.
ego can be a real choke point as well for
Mm,
pastors and leaders.
yep.
They want to spiritualize it, but really it's just their ego.
Yeah. Wow.
Um,
Wow. We're going to
and
have to get you on again to talk more about some of this sort of
uh,
stuff, because there's just so
yeah,
much
so
gold.
a lot
It's amazing.
happened in
Mm,
me. Um, I think the leader definitely is the key. They can become the lead or the releasing person.
yep.
And look,
Yep.
I just found myself recognizing gifted people around me and
Mm,
realizing they're not mine to keep. They're
yeah.
mine to nurture, to set up for success. And so I
Mm,
was the one pulling them into my office going, you know what? I really think it's time you planted a church and I'm going to help you do it.
mm,
We
yep.
release groups of people to go with them.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I did want to touch on that as a part of our conversation today around Harvest Net. That was kind of birthed in, I think, around 2003, from what I know, and from there, not including, I'm assuming, what Perth Christian Life Centre was at the time, but 12 other churches have been pioneered or planted out of the Harvest Net kind of community, if you like, or movement. Um, Take us back to those moments, Pastor David, where like I'm really interested in how the formation of that thinking inside of you kind of took place, because it was the rise of like mega churches at that time. A lot's happening, as you said. You're kind of in that category in your own church ministry and what you're doing, but then all of a sudden you kind of, this was my observation anyway. And I was in a very kind of leadership driven environment at the time. Um, and there were things in my mind playing over, not from my church leadership, but just from books and conferences and this. like like Pastor David and what they're doing at Perth Christian Life Centre. They're giving away all their good people to go and do this, and it just really broke some of the wires in my brain that have been like, aren't we just trying to get really big? And so, I suppose the question is, the question is, yeah, while everyone else was kind of going, let's do campuses, you're in this thing of like, let's actually pioneer and release. And I'd just like to hear your heart and thoughts around how that came about. Was that a revelation thing? I mean, you just mentioned around that kingdom thing you had in Victoria. Was it stemming out of that? What was going on there?
Yeah, definitely kingdom. I got kingdom. I mean, got it rather than read a book and thought it was a nice idea. I
Mm,
got it. And I had also pioneered, and I
yeah,
was a part of our movement when pioneering was just get out there and charge the machine guns. We'll count the dead and the wounded later.
yeah,
Uh, that was how we went about it. If you're still standing, you're a hero. If you're a casualty, well, we'll sort of just forget all about that part.
yeah,
So that formed in me a desire. Wow, if ever I had the chance, I'd so want to set church planters up a
mm,
lot differently, because really they are heroes. They're
yeah,
they're out there pioneering on the coalface. A lot of us at that time we were talking about becoming developers instead of pioneers.
mm,
And so I developed this whole thing about explorers, pioneers, and developers. But a lot of the talk around was about developing rather than pioneering.
okay,
And I think the only place I could go to hear pioneer talk was actually missions conferences,
yeah, wow,
because a lot of our conferences were starting with the presumption that you'd already got a nucleus of people and how to grow it to
mm,
500, etc., rather than how do you start.
yeah,
But yeah, it did raise some eyebrows that
namely
how
these
come,
ones.
what you're giving away. I think the first one we planted, which is now Nations Church,
Yeah,
um, we probably initially there was 70 that went, and they all were tithing people,
wow,
good solid people. We didn't want people just to go and attend. I
yeah,
said, if you're going, you need to tithe and you need to work. And we wanted to start with children's ministry and good music.
mm,
um, so these were quality people that but as it rolled, I think up to about 200 people ended up going.
wow,
But hey, it gave them a great start, and
mm,
the rest is history. They are
yeah,
a
yeah.
fantastic church today with
Pastor
multiple.
Ken
That's right.
Lee, who
And Lee, that's right.
David's talking about at the moment. He's going to be on in a few episodes' time. So excited to
Okay. Well,
have
there
that
you go.
chat too. So
Well,
how did that go for you, David, in the context of then what was happening back at church? Like you've just sent 200 people that, by the sounds of it, are some, like obviously some key people, but involved people. Like I'm just thinking practically as a pastor now, like your youth team, your kids team, your worship team, your volunteer team, your just general presence and attendance in the church has seemingly gone like this. And that's, I suppose, where the you're giving away all your good people. And I know in a kingdom sense it's not like that. It's a very wrong mentality to think about it. But just on a practical level, was how did you, as the pastor of the church at that time, lead through that change for your church community that stayed?
in regard to the first one, are you referring to, or?
Well, yeah, maybe them all.
Um,
Were there obstacles in that? Is probably more the question. Were there obstacles, and if there were, how did you manage those obstacles of the change
yeah, I'm a
management,
very,
people leaving, and
the guys often joke about me, Joel Trelaw being another one. He was my youth leader, and he
Mhm.
was the second one we released. But just to be clear, we released the core, and then as the church grew, other people decided to go, but we were very deliberate about the core that went first.
Okay, yeah,
Um, and Yeah, I think the eldership thought I'd gone crazy. They were quite concerned at first. What's this model that you're doing? And, we're releasing these people. We took up an offering for
Mm.
them as well, so they could get started, get equipment, and etc. and so on. But we did say, I mean, there's a lot we could probably do a whole podcast about this, so
Yeah.
I'll try and keep it brief. But it did evolve. I'm not quite an organic leader. I'm fully into, okay, let's start heading north. And so I'd prefer to work with a compass than a
Okay.
map,
Yeah.
so I
Beautiful.
just held the compass. This is where we're going. And as you're going, you hit obstacles. Well, you're heading north, so you adjust. So that's really how it evolved. We learned a lot with the first one, then we learned some more with the second, and so on and so forth.
Mm.
But I kept, very relationally connected. I mean, even today, they're my friends.
Yeah.
Uh, and we would sit and have coffee. This was not, okay, you're gone, never want to see you again.
Yeah.
We stayed friends. But to answer your question, if that person had a core position in the church, they had to replace themselves before they went.
Okay.
So that's how we did it. If they
Yeah.
had a key position in children's church or musically, I remember one guy, he was a bass player, wanted to go, and I said, sure, but you need to train up someone else to play the bass.
Yeah.
So things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and then,
Love that.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot I could say about that, but it'd
Yeah.
take up too much time,
Yeah.
really.
And then, so in that sense of like you being an apostolic person, releasing people then into pioneering their own things, and how did the ongoing relationship work from there, or was it more kind of what was there a practical thing, like was like I suppose the buzzwords of the last kind of 20 years around like covering and governance and all those sorts of things. Did you have anything specific set in place, or was it more kind of that compass, heart, relational connection?
Yeah, for the first 12 months, where I was very hands-on with it until they could demonstrate they could form their own board, and then I'd meet with the board, and then yeah, my hands came off once they had their
Okay.
own board. So our goal was that they're pretty well not needing me to hover over them within 12 months. Once they could demonstrate these are good people, business people, people with understanding. Yeah, okay,
Mm.
you've got that. I was never seeking to have them as a campus. My
Mm.
goal was always that they'd be an autonomous
Mm.
church.
Yeah.
I didn't, I had during that time as it got rolling, I had churches who were existing wanting to become a part of HarvestNet, and I said, no, we don't do that. We plant churches.
Wow.
Um, so they were thinking, oh, okay, I'd like to come and be a part of
Mm.
HarvestNet, but it was a church, and it is still existing today under
Hmm.
Joel. But
Yeah.
yeah, our goal is to plant churches from the beginning, not
Mm.
adopt them. Yeah.
Mm. That's great. And I mean, I think that's just for all of those listening or watching is just another testament of Harvest Net and your spirit, David, around releasing. Like Harvest Net still continues today, and churches are continuing to be pioneered, and it's just a beautiful thing. And my understanding is that the goal is that then the Harvest Net churches remain kind of a part of a movement within a movement, if you like, and they have probably a commitment. You correct me if the terminology is wrong, but really just to keep pioneering churches as the Lord leads them to do so as a group. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's like a snowball rolling down the hill. So that was how we did it. So Ken's church now helped me plant the next church.
Yeah.
Uh, and so they released people and they took up an offering. And
Mm.
then, so Joel was released. He's the third church, but then the fourth church now gets the benefit of the help and
Yeah.
resource of the previous three churches, and on and on. And, so you can imagine the ninth church getting a
Yep.
fair bit of help. So that
Yep.
it just became, and then we asked them to give a percentage of their missions budget.
Great.
So HarvestNet had to be an item on the missions budget of these churches, and
Okay.
so that became a percentage that they'd give into a central fund,
Yep.
and that money was solely used for perpetuating the church planting.
Yep.
So it
Love
started
that.
small and just kept rolling down the hill,
Yeah.
more and more
Yeah.
momentum. Yeah.
In looking back on that, are there any kind of improvements that you look back on that now and go, oh, I would have done that slightly differently, or there was an impact in this area that we could have avoided if we just slightly change the how?
Yeah, not really, because I am organic and I just kept making course adjustments as I went. So
Yep.
if when I identified those things, I just made a course correction and with consultation with the guys. I think the only oops that I had was I got a little bit carried away. I planted three in 1 year. That really, we nearly died in childbirth, the
Yeah.
mother. And the other thing was I had to get clear in my head what a church planter looks like.
Mm.
Um, and I, in my zeal to, keep the momentum going, I pushed the guy in the deep end. And I apologized to him. He gave it 2 years before we both agreed he's just not a church planter, and he's a good guy, and he's still
Yeah.
on team today.
Yep.
Thankfully, he forgave me, but I caused him a lot of stress because he was trying to honor me, and
Mm.
take the church somewhere, but it sort of made me realize not everybody's cut out for this, and
Mm.
I had to identify what does the grace of a church planter actually look like.
Wow.
He was a guy that led a great department, and I misinterpreted his success leading that department as someone I could put in as a church planter. So,
What are some of those? What are those hallmarks that now in hindsight you're looking for? Maybe just two or three things that you're like,
well,
you know.
this is where we get into where I became probably looked at sideways because there's a big difference between that and a campus leader,
Yeah.
because they're um, well, I'd say more managing a
Yeah.
campus,
Yeah.
like we would a franchise, but they're taking their direction from someone else.
Mm.
A church planter who's being nurtured to be an autonomous church, they're more have ability of leading, um, their own ship. And they've got what I would say is I identified you've got a church inside you, and I'm going to help you get it out.
Beautiful.
That's really what I began to realize. I'd listened to these guys and realized, wow, you're describing a particular type of church,
Mm.
and I'm going to help you get that church into a reality.
Yeah.
Whereas
That's
in a
amazing.
campus situation, that guy would be flicked to the curb. He would be seen as rebellious. He would be
Mm.
seen as, someone to watch out for, because,
Mm.
this vision that's rising in him is, hang on a minute, I'm the senior
Yep.
leader. Your vision should be my vision.
Mm.
So probably now that we're talking about it, my concern about what I was seeing so much with campuses was that we weren't releasing leaders. We were raising people who could be managing a campus. But what about all the people that had a genuine gift of leadership and a
Mm,
church in their heart? What's happening to them? And so that was the difference, the main difference, and the tension at
yeah.
times that I felt coming from other places.
Mm, yep. No, fair enough. I think it's a fascinating observation, and I think it helps a lot of people in church leadership talking about this because, as we know, like the campus more managerial type of leader, there's nothing wrong with that person. That's not a it's not a hierarchical one's better than the other. It's an acknowledgement of gift, right? And it's an acknowledgement of some people are just cut out and probably won't survive. Like you were saying, that other guy didn't not survive, but really struggled in the pioneering space of doing his own church. The flip side is the person that's meant to be out, they don't survive in the campus type of thing. And so it's a both and thing that I'm hearing you talking about today. How do you if you're a senior leader in your space, like like you were when you were leading the church, or even now in your input into a church that's doing campus models, how do you help identify that and lead that in different environments as the person that's helping people find their gift?
Well, again, it's intuitive. I think if I am apostolic, that is part of the gift of the apostolic.
Yeah.
They're more able to spot that and not be threatened by it. I can sit and hear someone share their heart, and I can hear it. I can sense it. This person actually has a church inside them,
Yeah.
and so yeah, it's not so much a formula than a sense, and I think
Mm,
this is where we need to talk about the apostolic grace of
yeah.
recognition of other gifts and not be intimidated by the fact that they've got a grace upon their lives, and I want to be a part of seeing it released. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. We might just kind of go back to Perth CLC or towards the end now, and when you were there, and um, the journey continues, and then you come to a place where you're where don't want to put words in your mouth, but God's speaking to you about stepping out of your role and succession. And I wanted to touch base on this because it's from my experience and from what I've observed, the succession of someone in your kind of role with your influence and all the rest of it, it's can be complex and people don't do it well at times. Can you talk us through how you got to the place where you were clear on, hey, my time's up, and also how that journey just unfolded?
Yeah, again, kingdom had a lot to do with it. The church wasn't mine. I saw it as a baton. I didn't see myself as a soul runner. I saw myself in a
Mm,
relay race. And God handed me the baton and said, "This is yours to run with, but
mm,
it's not yours to keep. And
wow.
one day you're going to run out of puff, and it's time. It will be time to hand over to the next runner."
Mm,
So that's how I saw it, and that day came, even though, you know, I I couldn't imagine it because I had plenty of energy, but I got to about 62, and I could tell the church was 3,000 people now, even though we'd planted all these churches. That
yeah.
was kingdom mathematics. It was like
Yeah. Yeah.
pruning a rose bush. The more we pruned it, the more it grew.
Oh, wow. So
So.
cool.
Um, but I knew this church deserves someone that's still bouncing out of bed every day and full of beans and, energy. And I could tell my energy was starting to wane.
Mm,
And I thought, I love this church too much to just. It's like a relay runner who refuses to hand over the baton. They're going
mm,
to lose all that they've gained in that race
mm,
by holding on to it too long. and I just didn't want to do that.
Mm.
So before I got to that point, I started the conversation with the board and elders. Um, and it took them a while to really embrace that. But in other words, the church was going well. It
Yeah.
wasn't starting to go belly up.
Yeah.
It was still pumping along, but I could tell in myself that I was starting to run out of puff. And the
Mm.
same energy and dream and passion. Now, people wouldn't have seen that, but I could tell within myself something was starting to shift. I knew I wasn't finished in ministry,
Yeah.
but I knew the leadership, that drive
Yeah.
of a church this size.
Mm.
And then it hit us that, well, you don't hand the baton to some guy that's sitting around by the phone waiting for an opportunity. Uh, Now, a church of this size, with all,
Yeah.
the property and the
Yeah.
departments and so much developed, um, we need to hand it over to the next runner that's already doing something significant, uh, has a proven leadership gift.
Hmm.
So, as you've already alluded to, we had quite a few sons in the faith that have gone out. So we were
Yeah.
spoilt for choice, really. But the board
Yeah.
and elders prayed and felt Kingdom City, because Pastor Mark was my keyboard player.
Yeah.
It was his church,
Yeah.
where his family
Yeah.
and all of his brothers and sisters. So he actually went out from Perth CLC.
Yeah.
And so that was the decision of the board and elders to hand the baton and become a campus of Kingdom City.
Mm. Yeah. No, amazing. What advice would you give someone that's maybe sitting in your shoes right now? Um, like I think I want to ask two things. Like, what advice would you give to someone that's considering succession, number one, and number two, um, how do you discern the difference between God's voice and the time to move on versus just like I'm tired and this is a flat patch in my time in church leadership?
Yeah, well, I knew I wasn't having a bad Monday. I've
Okay.
had enough of those where I'm
Yep.
mentally wording my resignation after a bad Sunday. So I knew what I was feeling was different.
Sure.
And I held it to myself. I wasn't sort of
Yeah.
blurting it out until I was really certain that no, this isn't just a bad Monday or a bad patch. It
Mm.
just felt different.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, yeah, my love for the church
Mm.
and kingdom understanding that it's more important that I do this well than hang on too long. I've
Mm.
seen that happen too much.
Yeah.
And the very thing that we poured our lives into building, we're now riding into the ground.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, if you're not done with ministry, but you're done leading a church and being the sole visionary voice in the church, then yeah, maybe that's a conversation you can have. I mean, in my case, I could um, have relationship, and Mark wasn't intimidated by having me around. Normally,
Yeah.
a lot of guys would have said, well, you need to leave, you need to
Yeah.
be out of here.
Yeah.
uh so because we had a friendship and a relationship, and I
Mm.
guess he knew me well enough, he was happy to have me on the team,
Yeah.
rather than have me leave.
Yeah.
But honestly, I've seen this happen so often where guys just hang on too long. They aren't reading the right signs, or they don't get the idea that this is a baton. It's not yours.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
belongs to God.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you've had the privilege of running with the baton for X amount of years, but
Mm.
hey, you want to leave well, you better hand over that baton well. So
Mm.
I think it was probably took about a 2-year period, to be
Okay.
honest, to
Yep.
do it well. And that's another podcast of the process we went through to do it well.
Mm.
Um, did I answer your question, Matt? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
you did. And just the tail end of that was, would you give, what sort of advice would you give someone, I suppose, that's in your position as a pastor that's kind of working a succession plan, that is in that kind of transition moment? Are there any kind of words of wisdom that you pass on to that person if you were
Oh,
sitting before them today?
look, it'd be a shame to think after all those years that you're just gonna sit at home and watch Netflix.
Yeah, yeah,
What about the possibility that you can still make a great contribution, but
yep,
not as the leader?
yep,
If you can release that baton well and celebrate the next person, why not? Why
mm,
not still have a contribution? And so there's ways to do it. I mean,
yep,
there to me, I by God's grace want to keep preaching, teaching till God takes me home,
yeah,
and I don't really see myself in a job. And I think another podcast for another time, start realizing that this day is coming. And a lot of guys hang on too long because they haven't financially set themselves up. They've
mm,
been unwise
yeah,
in the way and so the only reason why they're hanging on is for a financial reason. And leaning into the camera, that's not good enough. All
yeah,
right.
yeah. Well
Um,
said.
because that's not a good God reason. So
Yeah,
be wise, set yourself up, maybe give yourself a 5-year runway at least
yeah,
to do it well. Uh,
yeah.
because a lot of guys are hanging on not for a God reason, but for a money reason.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I love the illustration. Like, another question I've written down that I sent through to you was like, what's the what do you think why do you think church leaders struggle with good, well-timed successions in church life? But as you explain kind of your, I suppose, approach with, like, we see this as a baton that we're kind of like, we're stewarding this. It's not
Mm,
ours.
yeah,
We don't own it. We're just stewards of it, and we want to
absolutely.
hand it in the best condition to the next
Mm,
person, generation, etc. Kind of has helped me bring an answer to that question around, well, it's not ours. How, in a way, it's like almost, how dare we think it's ours? It's God's. It's
mm.
God's church. And
Oh,
yeah, I really want to, I suppose, just thank you for that, having that spirit and carrying that culture. I think even my observation, if I can say, around the transition with Mark and Kingdom City, like the culture that was set up relationally, and I know have been good friends with Mark over the years, but just that culture for you to coexist within the environment, in fact, have a significant role and move forward in Kingdom City now, of the church that you pioneered, being a part of Kingdom City, or took over, is just a wonderful testament to, I think, the culture and that kingdom attitude of, like, this isn't mine, this is God's, and I want to take it forward. It's really amazing.
yeah, and the church is certainly gone for. And the other thing was, I had all these prophecies for respective people of what they saw, and so hang on, I haven't seen that. But little did I know, I'm seeing them now as a Kingdom City campus.
Amazing.
I thought, oh, I
Yeah.
thought I'd see it well, but no, it was for the next runner.
Oh,
So
that's so good.
God, looking down through the corridor of time, was actually prophesying beyond my run
Yeah.
into the next. So I'm standing
Yeah.
there going, "Wow, this was prophesied about this campus,
Yeah.
and now I'm seeing it." But the next runner, it was the
Yeah.
next runner that
Yeah.
was going to see it come in. Mm.
Yeah. No, it's so good. And yeah, I think we keep saying this, and maybe we'll try and do this at some other point in time. But there's about 50 different episodes in this that I'd love to keep drilling down down into and asking more questions. Just really, really value your wisdom and your input, and I know that this conversation would have helped a lot of people, that are either in transitions or on the journey of pioneering or whatever. And so really, really, really appreciate it. One of the things that I want to quickly do is just some real quick rapid fire questions just to wrap this up before I let you go, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. What's the best, outside of the Bible, obviously, that goes without saying, but what's the best book you've read in the last 12 months and why? How's it impacted you?
Supernatural by Michael Heiser. I found Michael Heiser and I thought, wow, this guy, where's he been all my life?
Awesome.
I love reading his stuff and his insights and everything. So
Do
that's
you
it.
have a big takeaway from that book that you can share with us? Like an aha type of moment?
Oh boy, so much. He goes into there was actually three falls. There was the fall in the garden. There was he goes into a lot what was going on where it talks about the sons of God coming down, seeing the sons of the daughters of men and
Yep.
where the Nephilim came from. And
Yep.
wow, boy, that guy unpacks it all. So look,
Oh, wow.
there is a
Nephilim, now
lot
we're
in
definitely
there.
in another podcast.
Yeah, that's another wow, wow.
That's out of my league, I think.
Yeah, I, he does it so well.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah.
If you could go back in time and have coffee with someone, who would it be and why?
Yeah, you know what? I saw that there question. I thought, it'd have to be John, who wrote the Gospel of John,
Yep.
because he's saying a lot of stuff, and I'm going, I know you're trying to tell me something, and I'm not quite. He's just you pick up the other Gospels.
Yep.
And okay, we're tracking, but John comes, he's just got Jesus saying and doing these things. And I know at times he's alluding to something, and I'm going, I just would really like to sit down
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
help me understand what you wanted me to get when you said
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, that guy. In some ways, the Gospel of John, I love it, but there's that element of frustration when you know that they're telling you something
Yeah.
a lot deeper than what you're getting.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. For sure. That's great. Something. Are you prepared to share something about yourself people wouldn't know?
Yeah, I love motorbikes, very fast motorbikes.
Really?
Actually had to give them up because I just couldn't control I'd get
Oh.
on them and
Yep.
think I'm going to behave today, but
Yep.
no, 5 minutes into the ride, so
Oh, love
I
that.
would I would describe myself as a corner freak. How
Wow.
can I take this corner fast? And yeah, so
Oh,
yeah, I had to give them up. I just so I've wrecked about three bikes. I've
yep.
broken some bones. Ended up in hospital.
What's your best favorite bike? What's your dream bike? If someone
The
listening
last
right now,
one.
a billionaire's listening, and they want to buy your motorbike, what is it?
No, well, see, not cruisers, not Harleys. The
Okay.
last one I was riding was a Buell.
Okay.
Yeah, they're belt driven. They're more American bikes
Yep.
and just built for speed and cornering.
Love that.
And they are just amazing bikes. I'll start to drool if I keep talking about that.
I've got a good friend of mine, Stuart, his name is, and he's got about 20 collector bikes. So if you're ever in Melbourne, we'll have to
Oh,
stop
right.
past his
Okay.
garage and have a look.
Yes.
But anyway,
I love motorbikes, but as I say, I had to admit, just can't behave on them.
yeah,
And I've got to my age and I'm still walking.
yeah.
No pins in my legs.
Oh, that's
So,
good.
yeah.
Bit of self control there was great.
Yeah.
What's your favorite food?
Oh, gee, I'm not a foodie. I've
Okay.
traveled a lot, done a lot of mission stuff, lived in
Yeah.
Indian villages. So I think all that favorite food stuff got bashed out of me. I love
Yep.
a banana leaf, if you know what that is, the
Yes.
Malaysia. Yes, I
Yep.
I enjoy that. Pastor
Beautiful.
Mark and a few of us love to sit down and have banana leaf together. So that's probably in the up there
Yep.
on the list. Yeah.
Awesome. Favorite sport and team?
Yeah, I had a misspent youth, so sporting was, but I'd have to say, being a Queenslander, I'm
Yep.
into rugby league, and it'd have to be the Brisbane Broncos.
Oh, nice one.
So
Nice
I
one.
love AFL, that's great, but there's something different happens when I sit down and watch the grand final of rugby league. It's just,
Fair enough too.
or yeah, a game
No, I
from,
love that. And last but not least, Pastor David, thanks so much for your time. It's been so good. But if people want to connect with you, are you online, social media, and how can
yeah,
they get
I'm
connect
not a
with you?
great social media. If they friend me, they'll be very bored. They won't see too many updates. But yeah, they can find me on Instagram and Facebook. But yeah, I'm not a recluse. I'm happy for them to ferret me out.
Yeah, that's right. Go
They could
searching.
start by yeah, Facebook Messenger, and I could respond to that if they really wanted to connect.
Oh, great. Well, again, thanks so much for your time, Pastor David. So insightful and so much wisdom. And look forward to doing this again sometime soon.
Loved it. Okay, no
Really
worries.
appreciate your time. And yeah, thanks again.
No worries.
God bless. See ya.
Okay, bye.
Well, I told you at the start of this at the start of this episode that this was going to be an insightful conversation. I hope you enjoyed that. I really, really did enjoy it. It was powerful and absolutely incredible. Hey, there's another episode coming up soon, so stay on board. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, do all those sorts of things. Click the like button, click the subscribe button, depending on what platform you're on. Check out our website that's coming pretty soon, Church Next. That's churchnxt.com. And we'd love to connect with you there, where we just want to resource pastors and church leaders and help you. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. See you in the next one. Peace out.